So last time we were looking at the properties of orthogonal tensors, so we'll continue that discussion here. So if EI and EI bar are two sets of orthonormal bases, two sets of related as E I bar is equal to Q transpose times EI, where Q is equal to EK dyadic EK bar, or that is equal to E1 dyadic E1 bar plus E2 dyadic E2 bar plus E3 dyadic E3 bar. Okay, so we have already seen that when you form a tensor out of two orthonormal bases in this particular way, then it becomes a orthogonal tensor, right? So this belongs to orth plus. This we have already seen in the last class, and this. So if you take the transpose of this, and you will see, so this Q transpose will be equal to E1 bar dyadic E1 plus E2 bar dyadic E2 plus E3 bar dyadic E3. And then now if you multiply it, so Q transpose times EI will give you EI bar. So suppose if you multiply this by E1, then you will get E1 bar. If you multiply this by E2, then you will get E2 bar, and if you multiply this by E3, you will get E3 bar. So that shows that this EI bar can be obtained as Q transpose times EI, where Q is a proper orthogonal tensor here, or a rotation. Fine. Then now let us look at the components of EI of Qij. So Qij is equal to EI dot K bar times Ej, and this can be written as equal to Ek bar dot Ej times Ei dot Ek, and this is equal to Ek bar dot Ej times delta Ik, and this is equal to Ei bar dot Ej. So you get that the components of this particular tensor here with respect to the EI basis is EI bar dot Ej. So if I just take a very simple example here, so suppose if I take this as E1, E2, and then this I take as E1 bar, E2 bar, and let us take this angle as theta, and then imagine that the E3 and the E3 bar are the same, okay, and they come out of the board. Then in that particular case, your Q11 will be equal to E1 bar dot E1, which will be equal to cos theta. Then your Q12 will be E1 bar dot E2, that will be equal to sin theta, and so on. Okay, so basically the matrix of components of this Q will be equal to cos theta, sin theta, 0, minus sin theta, cos theta, 0, 0, 0, 1. Because the E3 and the E3 bar are along the same direction here. So that's why you will get this. So this is just an example. So of course the transformation can be in 3D itself. Right now I'm just giving an example of a 2D transformation here. Yes, then now using this Q that I have introduced here, this is this Ek dyadic Ek bar. Now we can write the components, the transformation law for the components of a vector and also for a second order tensor. So let us look at that now. So I can write now that EI bar is equal to ei bar dot ej times ej, right? So this is exactly analogous to u equal to u dot ei times ei, right? So from this relation I can write ei bar as ei bar dot ej times ej, and this ei bar dot ej is qij. So this I can write as qij times ej. So this is the transformation law. And then similarly you can write the inverse relation. So that is ei is equal to ei dot ej bar times ej bar. So that you can write it in this particular way as qji times ej bar. So that is the reverse transformation. Now we can write the transformation law for the components of a vector from one basis to another basis. So if I write now vi bar as equal to v dot ei bar, okay, and this ei bar is equal to qij times ej. So you substitute that. So you will get that v dot qij times ej, and this I can write as qij v dot ej, and this is equal to qij vj. So you get that vi bar is equal to qij vj. Okay. Similarly, now you can derive the, so this is the transformation law for a vector. In a similar way, you can derive the transformation law for the components of a second order tensor if you change the basis. Okay, so this you can write as Tij bar is equal to Ei bar dot T Ej bar. Okay, and then now you express this Ei bar and Ej bar in terms of Ei and Ej, you will get finally, so I am just writing the final result, Qim Qjn Tmn. So you can write it in this particular way. So you will notice that for the transformation law of a vector, this Q occurs once. Okay, for the transformation law for a second order tensor, this Q occurs twice. For a third order tensor, it would occur 3 times. For a fourth order tensor, it would occur 4 times, and so on and so forth. Okay. So all this, okay, that generalization we will not consider here, but I am just saying these things can be generalized. Right, and you can also write it in matrix form. So suppose if I write the components of this vector V bar, then that I can write as the matrix of Q times the matrix of V. Okay. So that I can write it in this particular way. So when I put the brackets, that means that indicates the components of of a particular vector with respect to a given basis. Okay, so so this is different. So suppose if I write V bar equal to Q times V. So if I write it like this, then actually this V bar and V are different vectors in that case. So basically then your V is this way and then your Q of V is some rotated vector. But here whenever I put this bracket, it is not a rotated vector. The vector is the same. I am just referring to the components of that vector with respect to 2 different bases. So I will distinguish between these cases where I don't put a bracket and where I am putting a bracket. Okay, so that will be. So similarly, for the tensor T, the components can be written as Q times T times Q transpose. And then you can write the inverse by just multiplying it by Q on this side and Q transpose from the other side. You can get the relation for T in terms. So you will get T is equal to Q transpose times T bar times Q. Okay, so that also you can get. So actually it is possible to write it in this matrix form only for vectors and second order tensors. For third order tensors and fourth order tensors, you cannot write it in this particular matrix form. Then you have to go back to the tensor transformation law in the components itself. So I have already given you an example. So you can use this example to transform, let us say, suppose if you know the components of a tensor with respect to the E1, E2 basis, you can use this relation to find the components of a tensor with respect to the E1 bar, E2 bar coordinate system using this Q, the matrix Q here. Okay, now let us look at some of the properties of Q, okay, orthogonal tensor. So we will look at eigenvalues, eigenvectors of Q and so on. So actually Q has a very, very rich structure, okay, and some of the, so we, in this class we will not be able to study all the various kinds of properties, but at least a few important properties we will take a look at that. So the first property is that the eigenvalues have a magnitude 1, okay, whether they are complex valued or not, the magnitude is 1, okay. So magnitude of the eigenvalues is 1, magnitude of the eigenvalues is always 1, always 1. So you can write, see, Qn you can write as lambda n, and then Qn hat you can write as lambda hat n hat. So this hat will denote the complex conjugate of that. So here itself you can see that if lambda and n are the eigenvalue eigenvector, then lambda hat n hat are the corresponding conjugate eigenvalues and eigenvectors here. Right. So now if I take the dot product between these two, so you will get that Qn comma Qn hat is equal to lambda times, so if you take the dot product, so this is lambda lambda hat n comma n hat. So, and then you use the property of the transpose here, so you will get that Q transpose Qn comma n hat is equal to lambda lambda hat n comma n hat, and here Q transpose Q is identity, so you will get n comma n hat is equal to lambda lambda hat n comma n hat, and either you cancel or it is 1, whichever way you want to prefer it. So finally this will imply that lambda lambda hat is equal to 1. So so that shows that the magnitude of the eigenvalues of a orthogonal tensor is always 1, even if it is complex valued or real, it doesn't matter. Now if it is real, okay, so if the eigenvalue is real, so if eigenvalue is real, right, then what you will get is that lambda square will be equal to plus 1 from this particular relation, because lambda hat will be equal to lambda, and then this will imply that lambda is equal to plus minus 1. Okay. So the real eigenvalues of an orthogonal tensor can only be plus 1 or minus 1 here. Yes, so now let us look at what is known as the axis of a proper orthogonal tensor. Now talk about the axis of R belonging to R plus. Okay. So if R is not equal to I, is a rotation, then the set of vectors E such that RE is equal to E is the one-dimensional subspace E called the axis. Yeah, what we mean by one-dimensional subspace is that it's just unique. Basically, we say that the axis is unique. That's the only thing here. So, so basically we exclude I, because, so if you see, I times E equal to E is always true, right? So you can choose any vector, in fact, and then, so there is no uniqueness when R is equal to I. But if you choose R not equal to I, which is a rotation, right, then you get a unique vector as the axis here. This, so the axis in this particular sense. So physically you can think of the geography globe, where the the axis of the globe, right? So that does not rotate when you rotate the globe, right? Any other vector if you draw, let's take a point on the equator and you rotate the globe, then that point will rotate, right? So so if you operate on any other vector other than the axis by r, it gives you a different vector. It gives you a rotated vector. But when r acts on E, then it remains E itself. So that is exactly like the globe, your physical, the geography globe, exactly in that sense. So so that, I mean, that is sort of a physical interpretation of this particular result here. Okay, so let us prove this theorem here now. So first we will show that there is always an eigenvalue which is 1, right? So this is actually exactly an eigenvalue problem. If you take this as lambda times E, lambda is equal to 1, right? So basically we have to show that +1 is always an eigenvalue here. Yes. So let us show that first. First show that +1 is always an eigenvalue. Always an eigenvalue of R. Okay. So here, if I write the characteristic equation, determinant of R minus I, that is equal to determinant of R minus R transpose. So that is equal to determinant of R times determinant of I minus R transpose, and determinant of R is equal to +1. So this I can eliminate, and then this is determinant of I minus R the whole transpose, which is equal to determinant of I minus R, determinant of I minus R, which is equal to -1 cube of determinant of R minus I. So I am using the result that determinant of lambda t is lambda cube times determinant of t, because the underlying space is 3-dimensional. So that is what we get here. So what we have got is that determinant of R minus I is minus of determinant of R minus I, right? So this implies that determinant of R minus I is equal to 0. And that shows that +1 is always an eigenvalue of a rotation here in this particular case. Fine. Now let us show this uniqueness. Okay, so this uniqueness proof is quite subtle. Okay, so it's not very trivial to prove this uniqueness. So let us look at this proof. Uniqueness of E now. So have that R E is equal to E. Right? Now multiply both sides by R transpose. So you will get that E is equal to R transpose times E. Okay, so then rewrite it. So this I can rewrite as R transpose E is equal to E. Now take this equation and this equation, and then you subtract. So what you will get is that R minus R transpose times E is equal to 0. This is what you will get. Now let us take two cases. Okay. So the first case is where R is not symmetric. Okay. So first case is R does not belong to sim. Okay. So it is not symmetric. Then in that case, R minus R transpose is a Q-symmetric tensor. Right? So this implies that R minus R transpose belongs to Q. And there we have seen that the axial vector of a Q-symmetric tensor is unique. Correct? So from this, so since the axial vector is unique, right? Since the axial vector of a Q-symmetric tensor, Q-symmetric tensor is unique. So E is unique, right? So E is unique. Because see here the magnitude is going to be unity only. So in the case of an axial vector, the magnitude need not be unity, but when you are talking of this E, the axis, because it is an eigenvector corresponding to the eigenvalue plus 1, so the magnitude is always unity in that particular case here. So that disposes of this possibility that it is unsymmetric. Now let us look at the other possibility that it is symmetric. So let us look at that. So second possibility now is that R belongs to sim. Now we have seen that the eigenvalues can only be plus 1 or minus 1, correct? So first of all, you have that determinant of R is equal to lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda 3 is equal to plus 1. And the eigenvalues can only be eigenvalues can only be plus 1 or minus 1, right? Because it is a symmetric tensor, so the eigenvalues are real in this case. So that that part I have not yet covered, but I will be covering them. So the eigenvalues they are real and they can only be plus 1 or minus 1. So that part I proved. So the only possibility is, and R is not equal to identity. That is another thing that, so the only possibility is that lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda 3 is equal to 1, minus 1, minus 1. This is the only possibility because of all these facts here. Okay, they can only be plus 1, minus 1. The product has to be equal to plus 1. Okay, and so from that you will get, and R is not equal to identity. So this is the only possibility that you get here. Fine. Now from this, okay, so and now you see here that this eigenvalue is a distinct eigenvalue. Right? So 1 is a distinct eigenvalue. And hence the eigenvector will be unique. Hence E, the eigenvector is unique. So the eigenvectors corresponding to minus 1 are not unique, but the eigenvector corresponding to the distinct eigenvalue is unique, and so E is unique. Okay, so as I said that you have to split this proof into symmetric and skew symmetric parts. I mean two cases where it can be skew symmetric, where this R minus R transpose is skew symmetric, or R minus R transpose is 0 when it is symmetric, and in that case you have to analyze that separately. So that is why in this proof one has to be a little bit careful about how this proof is. Yes, then so actually if it is symmetric, then from the spectral decomposition, so that again I will be covering today, but this from the spectral decomposition you will get, so when R belongs to sim, okay, minus identity, let us say, so I will exclude identity, then you will get that R is equal to 2 times E dyadic E minus I. So that just from this spectral decomposition you will get this particular result. So once we come to the spectral decomposition, you will be able to figure this out, that why you get this particular form. So this is the most general form of a proper orthogonal tensor that is symmetric and it excludes I. So this is the most general form of that. Okay. Anyway, yeah. So what we have seen so far is that if you give me a proper orthogonal tensor, then there exists a unique vector corresponding to the eigenvalue plus 1, which constitutes the axis. So that is this R E times. Now conversely, if you give me a vector, then I can construct a family of proper orthogonal tensors of which this vector is an axis. So let us look at that now. The converse of this particular theorem. So conversely, given W, there exists R belonging to R plus now, such that RW is equal to, and of course you can normalize it. If you want, you can normalize it by W on both sides, so that the magnitude is 1. So that is not so important, but you can do that. So we will look at the family of tensors RW comma alpha, which is equal to I plus sine alpha times W divided by W plus 1 minus cos alpha divided by W square times W square. So this W is this capital W is the skew symmetric tensor of which this small w is the axial vector. Okay, so W is the skew symmetric tensor, of which this small w is the axial vector. Okay, so so it is immediately obvious that R times W is equal to W, because see, we know that WW is equal to 0. So W square W is also equal to 0, right? So you'll get that R times W will be equal to W. So from this particular relation, this is immediately obvious that your R times W will be W. So okay, so that shows that at least you get this RW equal to W, but we still have to show that R is a proper orthogonal tensor, right? So so we show that now. So so you will get that this let's see. So yeah, from the Cayley-Hamilton theorem. So from the Cayley-Hamilton theorem, Cayley-Hamilton, you will get that W cube is equal to minus of W square times W. Okay. So use the fact that trace of W is 0, then use the fact that determinant of W is also 0, okay, and then find out the second invariant, and then from that you will get that this one here, and then you will get that W raised to 4 from this is equal to minus W square times W square. Okay, so now you can write R transpose R. Okay, so R transpose R. So verify this. So this will be equal to I minus sine alpha by W times W plus 1 minus cos alpha by W square times W square times I plus sine alpha divided by W times W plus 1 minus cos alpha divided by W square times W square. Okay, so you will get like W cube, you will get W raised to 4, but we have already said what those things are. So if you substitute all of these things, finally you will get that this is equal to the identity tensor. Okay, so that shows that R is a orthogonal tensor. Now we also have to show that it is a proper orthogonal tensor. Okay, so that actually if you take R of W comma 0, okay, so that is just the identity tensor. If you set alpha equal to 0, you will get that it is an identity tensor. And if you now draw the determinant of R as a function of alpha, okay, so you will see that at alpha equal to 0, it is 1, correct? So determinant is equal to 1. So this implies that determinant of R equal to 1 here. So that is the value at this particular point. Now the determinant can only be plus 1 or minus 1, but it is a continuous function of alpha, so it cannot jump from here to here, right? It starts from here and it cannot jump in a discontinuous way because it is a continuous function of alpha. Hence the determinant has to be equal to plus 1. Okay? So using this continuity argument, we can now say, so this implies that determinant of R is equal to plus 1. So this actually here, determinant of R for W comma 0 is equal to 1, but now because of this continuity argument, it holds for all alpha. So what we have shown is that even for arbitrary alpha, the determinant of R is equal to +1, and hence it is a proper orthogonal tensor. So here we showed that, first we showed that it is a orthogonal tensor, then we showed that the determinant has to be equal to +1. Then from these two things we can conclude that it is a proper orthogonal tensor. Okay. All right, so let us see. So actually, quite interestingly, I had mentioned this most general form of R when it is symmetric. So if you write Rw comma pi, actually R of W comma pi, if you put that as pi there, then you will get that this is 2 times E dyadic E minus I. So you will get that most general form for when alpha equal to pi, with E is W by W. If you actually substitute, pi, so this term will go to 0, and then you put cos pi will be -1, so this will become 2, and so on. So you simplify this, then you will get this particular thing here, whatever I have written here. Fine. Then, so actually there are lots and lots of representations. So this is one of the representations of R. Okay, and we have already seen the another representation of R in terms of 2 orthonormal bases, right? So there are lots and lots of representations of R. So some additional representations I have given in the book. So I will just give you one other additional representation. So as I said, you can take a look at the book for the proofs for all of these things. But let me just mention it, one such representation here. So yes, so R is equal to E dyadic E plus cos alpha times I minus E dyadic E plus sin alpha times R dyadic Q minus Q dyadic R. So where this E Q R is an orthonormal basis. Orthonormal basis. Okay. So this E is the same as that axis, whatever RE times E, right? That RE is equal to E. So E is the axis of the proper orthogonal tensor, and then if you take Q and R to be mutually perpendicular vectors and also which are orthogonal to E, then you can construct R in this particular way also. So this is another representation of R. So as I said, there are lots and lots of representations of R, so we will not go into all of them here. So basically, I mean, if you have a tensor of this particular form, then it is orthogonal. So that is one way. But conversely, if you give me an orthogonal, proper orthogonal tensor, then it can always be represented in such a way also. Okay, so the converse is also true. So just like we proved the converse for the previous representation, right? So in the same way, you can prove the that this is that any R which belongs to R plus can be represented in this particular way. Okay, so even the converse is also true. But as I said that we do not have the time to get into the proofs of all of these representations. As I said that please look up the book, and there are representations that can be given in terms of the complex eigenvalues and the eigenvectors also. Okay, so that is also another representation. So as I said, all these representations are quite useful in various contexts, in proving various kinds of properties, or in proofs of some other theorems involving rotations and so on and so forth. So we will not, as I said, we will not get into that. Just one interesting thing is that you need 3 parameters, okay, to represent Q in 3-dimensional space. Generally, we use these Euler angles to represent a Q, right? So that again, that representation in terms of the Euler angles is given in the book. So I will not get into that, but basically it is of this particular form here. So it is like cos xi minus sin xi 0, 0, 1, sin xi cos xi 0, 0 times 1, 0, 0, 0. So this is cos theta minus sin theta, then 0 sin theta cos theta times cos phi minus sin phi 0 sin phi 0 sorry cos phi 0 1 0 0. So these xi, theta and phi, these are the three Euler angles. Okay, so basically, I mean, no matter what representation you use, so this is again only one representation, but no matter what representation you use, you will require three parameters. So basically the idea is that actually you can set up a mapping between the space of orthogonal tensors and skew-symmetric tensors. Okay, and so you can see that the number of independent components in a skew-symmetric tensor is n into n minus 1 divided by 2. Correct? So in 3 dimensions, you have 3 into 2 divided by 2. So you have 3 independent components that we have already seen. For a skew-symmetric tensor in 3-dimensional space, you have only 3 independent components. For a skew-symmetric tensor in 2-dimensional space, you have only 1 independent component, and so on. Right? So basically the rotations, you can set up a one-to-one mapping between the space of rotations and the space of skew-symmetric tensors. So the number of parameters that are required to represent an orthogonal tensor in any given space is this n into n minus 1, because that is the number of independent components in the skew-symmetric tensor, and because of the mapping between the skew-symmetric tensor and the proper orthogonal tensor, this is the number of parameters that is what is required. So in 2-dimensional space, you can always write q as just cos theta sin theta minus sin theta cos theta. Only one angle theta is required, right? So that you can see this is 2 into 1 divided by 2, so only one parameter. In 3-dimensional space, I already mentioned 3 parameters. So those are the, I mean, Euler angles is one choice of these 3 parameters. If you go to 4-dimensional space, then you would need 6 parameters to represent an arbitrary q, and so on. Okay, so we'll not get again into the details of this, but I just thought that this is something very, very interesting that you should know. Fine. Yes, as I said, there are lots and lots of theorems on representations and so on. So again, we will not get into all those theorems here. I think most of the important things about Q, I think I have covered. Hope I'm not missing something here. Yes. Okay, I think sort of I have completed most of the properties of Q here. Okay, then I think in that case we will move on to symmetric tensors here. Okay, so let us go to symmetric tensors. So symmetric tensors. Theorem. So this I am going to denote by sim, okay, the set of symmetric tensors. So every S belonging to sim has at least one principal frame, at least one principal frame. So that is a right-handed so this word is right-handed, okay, triplet of orthogonal principal directions. And at most most three distinct principal values the principal values are always real. And for the principal directions, three possibilities exist. One is if lambda 1 is not equal to lambda 2, is not equal to lambda 3, is not equal to lambda 1, then the principal axes are unique. Principal axes are unique. Modulo sign reversal. If lambda 1 not equal to lambda 2 equal to lambda 3, then there is one unique, and there is one unique principal direction, and remaining two principal directions can be chosen arbitrarily. In the plane perpendicular to the first one and mutually perpendicular to each other, perpendicular to each other. And third possibility is if lambda 1 is lambda 2 is equal to lambda, then every right-handed frame, then every right-handed frame is a principal frame. And S is of the form S is equal to lambda times identity, and the so in all these three cases the components of S with respect to this principal frame is a diagonal matrix. So many times we say S is diagonalizable. So the components of S, components of S in the principal frame star is equal to lambda 1, 0, lambda 2, 0, 0, lambda 3. Okay, we need to continue. Okay. Fine. Okay. Then we will continue. Okay. So we'll go into the proof of this one. Yeah. Yes. So actually, I'm not going to go into the proof of the entire theorem, because we have already covered this in the ME242 class. Okay, so what I am going to do is that very briefly I am going to sketch the proofs. Okay, so not without going too much into the details of the proofs of this one here. So first of all, the fact that there are only 3 eigenvalues, that is obvious, because we can write s minus lambda I times n is equal to 0 as the eigenvalue problem. So we have that determinant of s minus lambda I is equal to 0, right? And then from this you will get that lambda cube minus I1 times lambda square plus I2 times lambda minus I3 is equal to 0. So this is the characteristic equation. So this will have 3 roots, right? So you can write this as lambda minus lambda 1, lambda minus lambda 2, lambda minus lambda 3 is equal to 0. So that will give you 3 eigenvalues corresponding to these 3 things. Okay, so that shows that there are 3 eigenvalues, but we have not yet shown that these eigenvalues are real. Okay, so let us look at that. So if I write now n dot Sn is equal to lambda n. So first let us write Sn is equal to lambda n. Similarly, you have Sn hat is equal to lambda hat n hat. Okay, so you write, so first assume that they are complex valued. So the hat now denotes that these are complex conjugates of that. So if your Sn is equal to lambda n, then Sn hat will be equal to lambda hat n hat. Then you take the dot product of this with n hat and take the dot product of this with n itself. Okay. Then if you subtract the two, you will get that n hat dot Sn minus n dot Sn hat is equal to lambda minus lambda hat of n dot n hat. Okay. And this, because it is symmetric, you can write this as S transpose times n dot n hat. And that is equal to S times n dot n hat, right? And which is the same as this one. So, so basically this whole term just goes to 0. Right? So what we have now is that lambda minus lambda hat times n dot n hat is equal to 0. And this is a positive number, right? Because that is just the magnitude of the eigenvector. So you will get that this is equal to, so this will imply that lambda is equal to lambda hat. So that means the imaginary part is 0 and you have real eigenvalues here. Right, and then similarly, so actually now we know that the eigenvalues and the corresponding eigenvectors are all real. Correct? Now let us go into each of these individual cases here. Right? So suppose if I write now the first case, which is, so let me just write that. So the first case looks like this. So first case is that lambda 1 is not equal to lambda 2, is not equal to lambda 3, is not equal to lambda 1. So in this particular case, if I write Sn1 is equal to lambda 1 n1. So let's take the first 2 eigenvalues. Then Sn2 is equal to lambda 2 n2. And now if you take the dot product of this with n2, take the dot product of this with n1, right, and then subtract the 2, then what you will get is that n2 dot Sn1 minus n1 dot Sn2 is equal to lambda 1 minus lambda 2 times n1 dot n2. And then again this part is 0 because of the, so this again can be written as S transpose times n1 dot n2, and S transpose is S itself because it is symmetric. So this part goes to 0, and so this is equal to 0, this whole thing is equal to 0. So you will get lambda 1 minus lambda 2 times n1 dot n2 is equal to 0. But this is not 0, correct? So hence this implies that n1 dot n2 is equal to 0. So that shows that your n1 is perpendicular to n2. So this is because the lambda 1 is distinct from lambda 2. Similarly, lambda 2 is distinct from lambda 3, right? So hence you will get, so similarly, you will get that n2 is perpendicular to n3 and n1 is perpendicular to n3. So that shows that you have a set of orthogonal unit vectors which are the eigenvectors of S. To show uniqueness, so suppose if n1, n2, n3 is one set of eigenvectors and r1, r2, r3 is another set of eigenvectors, then now you will see that again by going through the same proof, you will see that r1 has to be perpendicular to r2 and r3, right? r1 perpendicular to r2, r1 perpendicular to r3, but n2 and n3 are also eigenvectors corresponding to lambda 2 and lambda 3. So you will get that r1 is also perpendicular to n2 and r1 is also perpendicular to n3. Okay, so if they are distinct, right, then you will see that this is not possible. So this is possible, that this is all these conditions are satisfied only if your n1 is plus minus r1, n2 is plus minus r2, and n3 is plus minus r3. So that shows that you have uniqueness of the eigenvectors when the eigenvalues are distinct. So the modulo sign reversal means the sign reversal we do not consider as non-uniqueness. Okay, so basically it has to be in a different direction. Then only we consider it as a non-uniqueness. So this plus minus is not considered as a non-uniqueness. So that is why I wrote that modulo sign reversal that I wrote. That means that it is that is not considered as a non-uniqueness of the eigenvector. Then now you can see that what about the component now in this particular basis? So if you use your representation now that this is Tij Ei dyadic Ej, right? So you choose this Ei to be Ei star. So these Ei star are the eigenvectors itself in this particular eigenvector. So basically your E1 star is N1, E2 star is N2, and E3 star is your N3. So those are the sets of eigenvectors themselves. Okay, then in that case, now your S E1 star will be equal to lambda 1 E1 star, S E2 star will be equal to lambda 2 E2 star, right? So from this you will get that E1 star dot S E1 star is equal to lambda 1, and then you will get E2 star dot S E2 star is equal to lambda 2, and so on. So here and then if you take the 2-1th component, so you will get E2 star dot S E1 star is equal to lambda 1 E1 star dot E2 star is equal to 0. So all the off diagonal terms are 0 and the diagonal terms are lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda 3. So you will get that S star is equal to lambda 1 0 0 0 lambda 2 0 0 0 lambda 3. So this is the representation of S with respect to the principal frame, right? The principal frame is basically the frame which is aligned along the eigenvectors of S, and in that basis your set of components is a diagonal matrix as written here, right? So here basically I am still using this when I am finding the components. I am just using this particular system. Right? So basically I am using the fact that Tij is Ei dot Tej. I am using this to find the components here. Right? So that is how I found out the individual components. Right. Now, if the eigenvalues are repeated, then what happens? Right. So, in that particular case, let us see what the components are. So, if I write now this E, so let me write now lambda 1 is not equal to lambda 2 is equal to lambda 3. In this particular case, it turns out that the eigenvector corresponding to this lambda 1 is unique. Okay. The now in this particular plane is an eigenvector corresponding to the repeated eigenvalue. Okay. But what we can do is we can still choose an orthonormal basis in this. Right. I can choose my E2 star and E3 star such that they are perpendicular to each other and also perpendicular to E1, right? And then in this particular basis, I will again get a star as equal to lambda 1, 0, 0, 0, lambda 2, 0, 0, 0, lambda 3. Okay, so again I will get, so of course, in this particular case, your lambda 3 is the same as lambda 2, but again you will get this. The important thing to note is that this E2 star, E3 star is not unique. So basically you can choose some other set of directions also, but what is important is that you can always choose an orthonormal basis, right? And in which the components of S are given by this diagonal. So I am not going through the proof of this because as I said that I have already covered that in ME 242. In case you have not undergone a course such as ME 242 or if you have not seen this proof, you can take a look at the book. So because as I said that we are the ME 242 is a prerequisite, so we are supposed to have covered this proof here. So I am not going into all the details about how we get this particular thing, but this gives a summary of the final result here. And then finally, if you have lambda 1 is equal to lambda 2 equal to lambda 3 equal to lambda, then in that case you will get that S is equal to lambda I. So that means it is like a hydrostatic tensor or whatever you want to call it. Lambda times identity will always be the form, and even in this particular case you can choose any three sets of orthonormal vectors, and then in that basis again your S will be, so then it will be just lambda lambda lambda, so it will be lambda times identity in that particular case. So to summarize, no matter which basis, which case you consider, whether all the eigenvalues are distinct or whether the eigenvalues are repeated, you can always choose an orthonormal basis such that the matrix of components of S with respect to that orthonormal basis is a diagonal matrix, lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda 3, right? Okay, then now let us again use this particular relation here. So now we come to something very, very important here. So we will, so what we have seen is that we always get a matrix of components S star, which is a diagonal matrix in the principal basis. So if I now choose, right, so now you choose your, as I said, you choose your E1 star to be along N1, your E2 star along N2 and E3 star to be along N3. So if they are not repeated, suppose if the eigenvalues are repeated, then as I said, then that choice need not be along N2 and N3, or it can be any two vectors in the plane perpendicular to that. Then what you will get is that you will get that this referred to this particular basis now, you will get that S is equal to lambda 1 times E1 star dyadic E1 star plus lambda 2 times E2 star dyadic E2 star plus lambda 3 times E3 star dyadic E3 star. Okay, so this is what is known as the spectral resolution, EI star dyadic EI star. So in summation form, I can write it in this particular way here. So this is very, very important result. So this is known as the spectral decomposition or resolution of a tensor. Okay. So this result I have obtained by simply using the principal frame as the basis. Okay, so here I am using, instead of the EI-EJ, I am using the principal frame. So for example, S12 will be 0 because the off diagonal. So that is why you don't get terms like E1 star dyadic E2 star in this particular representation. You don't have terms like E1 star dyadic E2 star because the S12 component is 0, S13 is 0. Only these three components are non-zero. So refer to the principal basis when you write this tensor, you will get this particular representation. So this is the, as I said, very, very important theorem which will be useful to prove lots and lots of properties of symmetric tensors and so on. Okay. So let us just show that this spectral resolution is unique. Okay. So actually that is a very surprising fact because we have already seen this case, right? We have already seen that if you take the case of repeated eigenvalues, then your E2 star and your E3 star are not unique, right, in the plane. So they can be any two vectors in the plane perpendicular to E1 star here, right? So the E2 star, E3 star are not unique, right? But what we will see is that even in this case, the spectral decomposition is unique. So let us look at this. So if you take S is equal to lambda 1 E1 star dyadic E1 star plus lambda 2 E2 star dyadic E2 star plus lambda 3 E3 star dyadic E3 star. Right? So now if you take the case where all the eigenvalues are distinct, right? So in that case what you get? So if lambda 1 not equal to lambda 2 not equal to lambda 3 not equal to lambda 1, then EI star are distinct, are unique, not distinct but unique, and hence this spectral decomposition is unique. And so let me call this as 1, and hence 1 is unique. Okay, then, so this is your first case. Then second case, if lambda 1 is not equal to lambda 2 is equal to lambda 3, then you can write S as equal to lambda 1 E1 star dyadic E1 star plus lambda 2 times E2 star dyadic E2 star plus E3 star dyadic E3 star. Right? Now this I can replace it with the identity tensor. So this is identity is equal to E1 star dyadic E1 star plus E2 star dyadic E2 star plus E3 star dyadic E3 star. Right? So I can replace this part by I minus E1 star dyadic E1 star. So what I will get is that this is equal to lambda 1 times E1 star dyadic E1 star plus lambda 2 times identity minus E1 star dyadic E1 star. Okay, and so now in this case the E1 star is unique, right? And so hence you will get that the spectral decomposition is unique, even if the eigenvalues are repeated. Two eigenvalues are repeated. And the third case is that if lambda 1 is equal to lambda 2 is equal to lambda 3 is equal to lambda, then in that particular case you will get that S is equal to lambda times identity, right, always. So that is actually, I mean, even from this result also you can see that E1 star dyadic E1 star plus E2 star dyadic E2 star plus E3 star dyadic E3 star is identity. So here it will be just lambda times that identity tensor, and so that is what you will get. So again, even in this case it is a unique. So to summarize, now this whole discussion that although the individual principal frame need not be unique. So for example, in this case, as I said, the choice of E2 star, E3 star is not unique. But when you look at the spectral decomposition, that spectral decomposition is still unique. Okay? So so as I said that in order to prove properties of symmetric tensors, so later on we will be looking at positive definite tensors and so on. So this spectral decomposition, this relation 1 is going to be very, very crucial in proving various properties of symmetric tensors. So okay, I think we will stop.